And we're live, Khalid and I. Khalid, you've said a few things have been going on your end, but also I have a few things I wanted to say about your stream with Duvid and a few other things as well. So hopefully we can have a discussion about that. How did you think it went? Your discussion with Duvid on what happens to us after we are dead, if that's a correct way of summing up what you were discussing.
Yeah. So yeah, what happens when we die? And I don't want to just talk about it in a theoretical way, but my streams are always about practical things, like how does that affect this life? And in short, I think we agreed on certain things of like fear of God helps you make wise choices. We were just getting stuck on, I think, some technicalities because he's really interested in some ways, like how can you describe the soul? And I was saying that's not important. It's like, how do you affect the soul? Because the soul is what you're going to take to the next life, and how do you affect it positively to have a positive next life? And you might say that's just thinking about the next life. Actually, how you affect it this life, you have a soul in this life as well. And if you negatively affect
Well,
it
well,
this
yes,
life,
because in this life,
yeah,
also, our soul resides in our body, and the idea of having an immortal soul is that when we are dead, the soul goes somewhere else while the body rots. It's not the end of our existence because the soul goes somewhere, heaven or hell, or to the next life, be it better or worse than the current one we have had. And this whole idea of the afterlife needs its tools. It's um I suppose I was watching it and thinking, why are they even arguing about it if here's a Jew, here's a Muslim, they're both supposed to believe in the afterlife. So what are they arguing about? And
but
and, and
he's
I
not
guess,
just a Jew. That's the problem. He's like he even said beforehand that he thinks the Jewish and Muslim perspectives on the soul are incomplete, and it's the Eastern philosophies are better. So he's not just a Jew. That's the thing.
well, yeah. So Eastern religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism believe in reincarnation, right? And
Mm,
Muslims are not supposed to believe in reincarnation. Um,
that's
but
right.
but the point is, ultra Orthodox Jews like Rabbi Misraki believes in reincarnation. He's always going on about it, and the Druze, and
Really?
yeah. So
And
I don't know why there's even an argument about it.
what's he
I'll, I'll,
talking
I'll
about?
I'll find you videos of Rabbi Misraki,
But
talking
well,
about
why is he
reincarnation.
talking about if he's a proper Jew? Like David is like experimental Jew, right? He like
Well, he's a
he doesn't even.
heretical Jew.
Yeah, exactly. So he can think of like reincarnation. So he's free to do that. But if he's official, if you've got an official rabbi, this guy is on YouTube and stuff like that, right? The one you're talking about, Mizvaki, whatever his name is, right?
Yes.
So what's he talking about reincarnation for? That's not Judaism.
Well, it's part of the 13 principles of Judaism, and they require Jews to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished. And it's not possible or logical to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished if you don't have the concept of the afterlife, right? Because if
No,
you're
but
just going by,
reincarnation. You said reincarnation.
well, it's
This
an
rabbi.
afterlife, isn't it? It's a form of an afterlife where you will be rewarded or punished according to how you behaved in this life. Because the narrative of reincarnation is that if you're a really evil person, you could be reincarnated as an animal, an insect who's crushed or slaughtered, blah blah blah. But if
Hmm,
you're a good person, if you're poor, you'll be rich. If you're ugly, you'll be pretty. That kind of idea, right? That's
sure. Yeah. But I still don't think Judaism and Islam and Christianity are Abrahamic faiths which have a core idea of what the afterlife is, and it's not reincarnation; it's heaven or hell.
Yeah, but we know that Jews do not have in their Torah any discussion of the afterlife.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they basically had to make it up because, if you look at the Torah, it doesn't say anything. And if you know anything about what the Sadducees and the Pharisees in the time of Jesus were arguing about, we will know that the Sadducees, who were the priesthood, said, well, there's no afterlife. The Torah says nothing about the afterlife. And it's the Pharisees who are whose ancestors rabbis are, who said, of course we have to believe in the afterlife. I mean, what's the point if we don't? It would make sense otherwise. So anyway, there was this argument, and in the Talmud, which is a commentary on the Torah, over the centuries, and the rabbi has talked about, different kinds of afterlife, and they've given names for it. I mean, they have Jannah and Jahannam, Gehonim. Anyway, they have their
Yeah,
Hebrew
similar words like in
version
Arabic.
of
Yeah.
those words. And also they have something called kafakela or something like that, which is to do with being moved around and whatever, which sounds a bit like reincarnation. I haven't checked this out, but anyway, it is well established that Jews do believe in an afterlife because the whole point of the afterlife is that you need to believe in it, or you won't be behaving properly because if you're not a very nice person, but the law says don't kill, you might still kill if you thought you'd get away with it, right? You might still steal.
Yeah.
You commit, all kinds of crimes if you thought you'd get away with it. If you are, the law or the king or whatever. So you might just do that if you didn't believe in an afterlife.
Yeah, I'm trying to check like what are the Jewish beliefs because we didn't even get to that. It didn't. He didn't. David didn't make clear that it was not a Jewish belief to have a afterlife. I always understood from Jews that all Jews are going to heaven. So there must be an
Well,
afterlife called heaven. But maybe that's not in the Torah. Is that what you're saying? It's just in the Talmud where the rabbis are just disgusting stuff. But apparently the Talmud is based on the Torah, isn't it?
I mean, the most important thing about Judaism, if you wanted to convert, it's like you have to accept the 13 principles of Judaism as are stated by Maimonides. And and it used to be that, if you can't accept them, then don't bother becoming a Jew. But my thing also is that why can't Muslims adopt the 13 principles of Judaism? Because I think any reasonable person should be able to use it. So maybe you want to have a
No, I
look at
think you're
that.
right. I just checked up Gemini AI and it says, yeah, that heaven and hell are not really in the Torah. Um, they're they're in the Tanakh. Actually, sorry, where is it?
The
Let me see.
Talmud.
Well, later developments, more detailed concepts of Gan Eden, paradise, and Genome, which is like Jahannam in Arabic,
Mhm.
hell, uh, were taught in prophetic books. Some later of the Tanakh, particularly Daniel and so. But that is the Bible, isn't it? I'm not sure.
Sorry, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Pentateuch. So
Right.
that would be Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. Those are the 5. The rest of the Old Testament is not the Torah, but collectively, the Old Testament is called the Tanakh.
Okay, so it is okay. Okay, so it is basically in the according to AI, I guess. So maybe I have to read it more carefully or something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole point is that the Torah comes from God. The rest
Yeah.
of the Old Testament is by mortal and fallible humans. Some of them may be prophecy, but anyway, that's the idea. And Jews do not believe in divine prophets, so that's why they just concentrate on the Torah really when they want to talk about God's word. So what I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
Because the Torah does not mention the afterlife, there was a period of confusion when Jews were arguing amongst themselves about the existence of it. So you had
Okay.
the priesthood called the Sadducees, who were, administering all the temple sacrifices when the temple was still in existence, saying we don't need to believe in all that. And the Pharisees, who didn't agree with them. I mean, the Pharisees were basically common people who, didn't think the priesthood was, looking after them properly, I guess. But anyway, they had this big fight, and the Sadducees are gone. The Essenes, who were a, um, a reclusive community,
Yeah.
well, they're now extinct. So we only have the Pharisees, and we can deduce from that that the Pharisees were correct because they're still in existence.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and I know the Christians, talk about Pharisees in unflattering terms, like, just somebody who quibbles about the law, but
Hmm.
doesn't really follow it, or is just an annoying hypocrite or something. But anyway, I'm saying, well, the law is important, and you can follow it well, you can follow it badly, but I guess the problem for Jews for a time was that there was no mention of the afterlife until Maimonides came along. And according to Daniel Hakikatju, he said Maimonides got a lot of his ideas from the Islamic culture and thinking of the time.
Yeah. So
Um,
Maimonides wasn't he like a philosopher, Jewish philosopher, uh, who lived within Islamic in was it Spain or Morocco or something?
yes, I'm not quite sure, but he was kicked out, and they tried to forcibly convert him. Um,
Really?
and yeah, and he got into trouble with his own people because apparently he simplified the religion so well that a lot of rabbis thought, well, we're going to lose all our business if we don't give these Jews their mumbo jumbo, and we can't have, Maimonides just making everything clear for them, because then they'll never come to us or pay us anything. So they burnt his books. But in the
Hmm.
end, Maimonides was recognized as, the greatest Jewish sage of Jewish history. Um, so his 13 principles are now what you would have to agree to were you to want to convert to Judaism. And
Okay.
um, but modern Jews are, finding ways of quibbling with it, like, oh, it's not literally true, it's, there's something a bit wrong here, a bit wrong there. But as a fundamentalist or ultra orthodox rabbi like Rabbi Misraki, he would insist, like, well, if you can't even, if you disagree with even one of these principles, you should be shown the door, because then you'll just be trouble. But anyway, he was actually a doctor, Maimonides.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so he was what's called a polymath, and an astronomer, as well as a rabbi. Um, so he lived in Cordoba, in
yeah.
Andalusia,
Spain. Yeah. So
within the
Islamic Spain.
yes, within the Almoravid Empire, until his family was expelled for refusing to convert to Islam. Later, he lived in Morocco and Egypt and worked as a rabbi, physician, and philosopher.
Yeah, I'm
So
quite shocked because I'm shocked that they tried to convert him, forcibly convert him to Islam, because Jews did very well in Islamic Spain. They had their own synagogues and everything. So what happened there? Is this some later period or something?
Well, I think some. I guess there were Muslims who, exceeded the bounds and did forcibly um, convert people, and ignored Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran that supports the First Amendment. Anyway, it was a Berber Muslim dynasty, and
Hmm.
I guess the Berbers were pirates and maybe a bit uncivilized, maybe.
Yeah, I think the Berbers maybe were uncivilized. Maybe it's a later period as well, the breakdown of Suppose we could check that out, I guess. But yeah, it's really anti-Islamic. It's very anti the whole that period, that scientific period of being open-minded, and we had dead Christians coming from Europe learning from the universities in Spain. So it sounds very odd that they would try to forcibly convert anybody. So there must be some the end period or something of Islamic Spain, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think even modern day Americans find it difficult to get their minds around the First Amendment, right? Because the people who don't notice that their First Amendment rights have been infringed, or and I say they have been, quite often, but a lot of Americans don't seem to have noticed that, and and of course the government wants Americans to believe in all kinds of things, so maybe it's a very difficult concept for people to
Oh,
grasp.
what freedom
um,
of religion?
and freedom of expression, yeah, freedom
Oh,
of belief and freedom of expression, because the whole point of these beliefs is that in a way you're free to express them, and in a way you're not. I mean, you could, I mean, this is an extreme example. If you think, um, okay, what's an example? If you think it's right to kill babies for fun, this is an extreme example.
mm-hmm.
And if people around you thought, um, if people around you thought you really believed that, then of course they would not trust you to do the babysitting or marry you or whatever, right? Your employment opportunities would be limited, and
Yeah.
and you would be, a pariah, and maybe in prison. But you could say, well, it's my opinion. Why should you know? But anyway, there are consequences. So I guess the in between bit is, well, you may think all kinds of things, but you better not say them. And didn't your mum and
Mm,
dad tell you, to not offer, to only say things when it's nice and not say unpleasant things that's going to make people hate you? So maybe you better shut up about, your peculiar views, kind of thing. And most of us, try to negotiate our way around life,
yeah.
sometimes getting it right and sometimes not, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure. Well, a lot of people say, "Well, nobody asked your opinion, Claire. Who asked you?" Blah blah blah. But anyway, I guess if you're going to be legalistic about the whole thing, you are allowed to say anything you believe. You are allowed freedom of expression and freedom of belief, but maybe not. Your idea that you think it's okay to kill babies for fun, or
Yeah,
that.
it's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Freedom of belief versus which you might compare with the Quran, which doesn't say freedom of belief. It says there's no compulsion. There should be no compulsion in matters of religion. So maybe freedom suggests that you're allowed to do your beliefs or something.
Yeah,
Or
but you suffer the consequences or the social consequences of
yeah,
stating your opinion. So within the law, it's still a crime, and it should be a crime to incite people to commit crimes. Yes,
yeah,
um, and it's still a crime to defame people, like tell lies about them to make people hate them. So that would be defamation,
yeah,
and the other is incitement to crime. Like, well, how about you go and rob a bank? Nobody will catch you if you wear a balaclava. I'll come with you, and I'll help. All kinds of things that might persuade you, if you were easily persuaded, to commit a crime. And of course, that should be a crime. If anybody heard me, suggesting to you that, we too should go and rob a bank, for
yeah.
example.
Yeah,
So,
Islam is not about freedom of speech, I wouldn't say, because it's about responsible speech. Like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, peace, for example, said, "Don't." There was a Muslim and a Jew debating, and the Jew was saying Moses is the best, and the Muslim was saying Muhammad's the best, and Prophet Muhammad said, "Don't even say Muhammad's the best. I don't upset people. Don't say bad things about other people." But sometimes there are limits to that. Like sometimes you do have to speak the truth, but try to speak the truth in a way that doesn't upset people. try, but
Yes.
sometimes you can't avoid it.
Yes, and I know in Islam that the Quran says, do not backbite, do not speak ill of your fellows.
Yeah,
And to do that is equivalent of eating your dead brother's corpse or something like that.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah. So obviously, and even non-Muslims talk about, scandal mongers and gossip mongers and tattletale and, snitchers. So Muslims and non-Muslims don't like people who tell stories about
yeah,
other, because I suppose if they're coming to you telling you bad stories about other people, soon they will be doing exactly the same to you. So shun such people. Um,
yeah. And it breaks down society, it breaks down communities. That's the reason as well.
yes, it causes division and hatred within the community, and may even result in murder. And like a social capital is something that came up recently. Um, Spoken about by somebody I know who hates Jews and Muslims, and I kept asking him, "What do you mean by social capital?" And he wouldn't tell me. But surely social capital is what is meant by social cohesion, created as a result of people in a community following the same religion, um, in a reasonable and proper way. It's like, yes, we're all Muslims, and we agree that God exists, and He revealed the Quran, and Muhammad is, and then we're going to follow the rules. We're going to follow, and then I guess you'd have a more cohesive society than a bunch of hippies or a bunch of libertarians or even a bunch
Mm.
of Christians who.
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. So hippies think they have an ideology. There aren't too many hippies now, but they used to be like free love, free whatever. Do you know what I mean? Um, but they ended up just taking drugs, and I don't think they did much besides protesting too much. It's a nice idea, I suppose. It was love. There was love in it, and it was an attempt to be cohesive, but there wasn't a clear set of guidance which Islam has or the religions have. Well, not so much Christianity anymore, but generally speaking. So yeah, social capital is an interesting idea. And how do you form cohesion? I think there are two things that are going through my mind. There's two elements. Like in Jordan, for example, we've got which is generally a Muslim country, you've got a lot of cohesion because you agree on this idea of unity that we should try to obey the leader, and there's brotherhood and things like that. And also being kind to each other, that's a really important thing. But then there's this other aspect which doesn't have to be just to do with religion. It could, well, I suppose it is. It's just which is not valued in the West, which is, like we were saying earlier on, not causing trouble or causing strife. What's the word? Like causing, you know what I mean? Right? So valuing or basically realizing that society is a fragile thing and it's not easy to maintain unless you're careful. So you carefully choose your word, be responsible. I suppose, in short, I'm saying Islam is about responsibility rather than just freedom. Freedom is a form of savagery in a way, just being free.
Well, yes, but I think it would work in any community. It's sort of like we are a community that agrees to obey the seven no height laws, or and then obviously the people say no, we just want to obey five of them, and then another one, another group say no, we just want to agree obey three of them. Then obviously you wouldn't be a good match, right? The ones who want to obey only five of them, or the ones who want. But anyway, people could lie. It's like they could say they want to, they will obey these rules, but actually, in reality, they don't. But at least they at least promise to, and if they don't, then they'll be punished accordingly and shamed for breaking their promises. I guess it's that kind of idea. And when you and David were talking about um, the afterlife, I suppose, or I was just thinking, well, how could you possibly know what's going to happen, and why are we arguing about it? I guess that was my
Well,
thinking.
that's actually a really important discussion. Like you said, how can we possibly know what's going to happen? And I tried to give a scientific reason as to why you should expect an afterlife, because we've already seen, I call it an evolution, maybe a better word, because um, David didn't like the word evolution, but basically we've actually gone through development of, but it's just considering this perspective. Like, did you understand when or hear when I was talking about, if you've gone from sperm to baby in the womb, you've already gone through a phase where the sperm essentially dies, and then it turns into a higher form, which is the baby in the womb. And then again, that baby in the womb, from its perspective, has to die to be birthed into human being outside the womb, because um, the baby in the womb has to sever its umbilical cord, which is its life source, and it doesn't know or understand the use of its lungs or its legs or all these other features it has. Okay, for it, it's just some funny stuff that's just around, right? And then only after it's birthed or it's left the life in the womb does it, and essentially dies, does it experience the fuller abilities, right? So in short, what I'm saying is we've already gone through death, death of the sperm to life in the womb, death of life in the womb to life outside the womb already. So scientifically, this is not even like peripheral, like funky science or anything. This is like commonly understood science, just having a different
But
perspective
there's
on it.
even a name for it, isn't it? Called metamorphosis, which is
I
what
suppose.
insects do. Because there's they have these different stages, right? Chrysalis, I'm trying to remember my biology now, and cocoon, and all these
Yeah,
different
so-
forms,
yeah, yeah.
caterpillar,
And so
before it
we've
becomes
gone
a butterfly.
through. So what my argument is, we've gone through a death life cycle already, that we already, this is not even hidden in science, but it's just that we don't look at it that way. So I'm saying if we've done that two times at least already, there might be in like even a lower level that we don't know before, that the sperm went through, right, to become a sperm. If we've already gone through that, why shouldn't we expect that process to continue? Just because we see it as death, that doesn't, like, from our limited perspective, why should it not continue to be part of that process? Because the sperm didn't know that it's going to turn to a baby, right? It's,
Hmm.
from its perspective, it was death. The baby in the womb, when it was birthed, essentially, didn't consider it a pleasant process, having its life support system, which is the umbilical cord, cut off. Do you know what I mean? So from
Hmm.
each perspective, it's death, but it's only a perspective. And we've seen that perspective is wrong
Hmm.
twice already. So that's what I was trying to explain. And I think that's a really important thing, that we want to separate. We don't want faith to be fairy tales. We want it to be like, oh, where are the facts? How can you support your belief system? And I think that's important,
Hmm.
isn't it? You
Oh,
make it like
absolutely.
logical, reasonable.
Yes, yes, because if you were shopping around for a religion, what will you be looking for? I would say I'd be looking for the most powerful God, because there's no point saying I'm worshiping this God and somebody comes along and say, "Hey, my God is more powerful than your pathetic God," so
Yeah.
you lose. Um, and since we're just, I guess, talking about the Abrahamic religions, it's like, in a way, it's so simple. Why do we have to make such a meal of things? So most of us are not Jews. So we can't. And there's no point converting to Judaism because it's obviously Judaism is too hard for the Jews, because we know that, because half of them are secular and
Mm.
not observant. So the contest is really between Christianity and Islam. And what's the problem with Christianity? Christianity is still the biggest and apparently the most powerful religious group in the world. But its direction is going down while Islam is going up. And then you think, what's the difference? The difference is, well, it could be cursed by God because they are guilty of idolatry. But even if God is not around to punish anyone for anything, um, Islam at least says clearly what people should do, which is to marry and have children within wedlock and not be gay and, blah, blah, blah. So at least, whatever you think of Muslims, they still manage to produce the next generation and manage to parent them better than Christians. And even if you don't believe in the afterlife or anything like that, that would be the crucial factor if you're interested in the survival of your group.
Yeah, so Muslims have clear rules, but the afterlife, like as I was discussing with David, is incredibly important because if you don't believe in an afterlife, you think you there's two problems. You think you can get away with stuff, and if there's an afterlife and the day of judgment, then there's going to be a point, however clever you are in this life, not going to get away with it because you're not clever more. You're not going to get past God. But also it gives meaning to things, that things just don't end here. Like I did all this work and I was good for it. It gives an eternal meaning. So an afterlife is incredibly important. And I think we get really depressed. This is one thing in a materialistic society, we don't really understand human beings well and how we function. We function at a deep level. We need meaning. That's a weird thing that
Mhm.
most don't get. Like, because we're in a materialistic society, all we think is, oh, what can we consume? That's all that matters. We just need to eat stuff. But actually, we're living in materialistic societies, and the number one way young men die is suicide. So having lots of stuff is not good enough. We need meaning, and we can't get away with
Yes.
that. Yeah, and life
When
is
you say
meaningless.
meaning,
Yeah, go on.
well, I'm just focusing on your use of the word meaning, because when you say meaning, I think you mean we want good to be rewarded and evil punished. That is really what makes us feel good and safe if we believe in it. But if we didn't, then we'd think, well, life is meaningless. Somebody could kill me for no reason, and nothing would happen to him. That kind of
Even
idea.
that feels a little bit shallow, that you want bad people to be punished. It's not bad. It's good that you want Hitler to be punished for the Holocaust and all the other evil things he did, right? But even that's not really what I meant by meaning. Meaning for me, according to the Quran, the whole purpose of humanity, people big and small, the jinn and the nas, as described in the Quran, is essentially is the word uses ibadat, which is translated as worship, but the really deep meaning of that word is oneness with God, basically. So it's like an infinite journey to connection to a higher form, or the way you become one with God is become increasingly godly, and less limited as well. So that's the whole thing about the process, evolution. You can call it evolutionary or developmentary process of like coming from lower forms like a sperm to a baby to a human to a soul, which is even less limited. Like, imagine you're a baby in a womb. Like, your whole world or universe is like tiny, right? You can't even walk around, right?
Mhm.
But then you get out of the womb and you're like, oh my gosh, like huge amount of space around me. Like, then imagine what would be the next level. Like, if you've got the universe and you think that's the universe, and then you would go, oh, that's not the universe. The universe is way more expansive. It's the soul. You're not limited by your body, you know? So to come back to what meaning is this kind of like basically an infinite journey to becoming beautiful and godly and one with God. So that's meaning for me, not just that you will get punished if you're bad.
Right. Yes. Well, you were talking about meaning and different levels of existence. I wonder if you've read a book called Flatland by Edwin Abbott.
No.
But um, maybe as somebody who teaches maths, you might be interested in it because it's basically talking about these different dimensions, first, second, and third dimension.
Sure.
So the first dimension is just a dot, and 2D is a
Paper.
line,
Yeah,
yeah,
flat. Yeah, yeah, sure.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and then 3D, and it was about somebody existing in all these dimensions, and discovering the next one. It's a very short book. I think you might just enjoy it. But
Did
anyway,
you
I just
find what I was saying confusing about like meaning is essentially an infinite journey to becoming godly or one with God? Is that weird or confusing? I'm interested in how what people understand.
I thought what I was saying was reinforcing what you said by
Okay.
mentioning Flatland, the book by Edwin Abbott,
Okay.
because these were a kind of a progressive advancement of from one kind of dimension to another, like first, second, third dimension. Um, so. Uh, um, so I well, okay,
Hmm.
okay. I thought I was
Yeah, okay, just
reinforcing what you were
checking.
saying.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So you're saying essentially there's far more to the world than we can see. There's so many dimensions and stuff like that, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean possibly that there might be, something beyond our lives, but even if there weren't, we can see the utility of these religions that basically say, well, you have to have children, you have to parent them properly, so you better have them within wedlock. That is the very least your religion should be doing for you,
Hmm.
right?
That makes
And
me think about this week's topic. Have you heard of Khabib? He's a famous UFC fighter, Muslim fighter. A lot of Muslims are very popular in that kind of realm, and a lot of men are really interested in following how they behave because how they behave seems to work, and they seem to have a lot of brotherhood and so many things like that. So it's attracting a lot of people to Islam. Have you heard of him first of all? UFC
um
Habib? No.
well, I've heard that. I mean, I am aware of a few, Muslim boxers, but I get it that young men, want somebody like them, like Andrew Tate, who smokes cigars and
They're
gets
not
lots of
just no,
women
no.
and that.
No, that's see, Habib's not that kind of guy. He's not a smoke cigar. He's a really healthy, whatever. He's not. He's very different to an Andrew Tate. He doesn't talk like Andrew Tate. He's very measured. Um, so he's talking about this week. Essentially, we're talking about what is a real man, and he's saying a real man is disciplined. And so, what does discipline mean? So, what do you think a real man is?
Well, thank you for talking about that because I mean, I've been going on about, let's just assume that all men, have the basic physical characteristics of being a man, and if they go to the gym, they can have biceps and six packs and whatever. Forget all that. The real essence of being a man is to have principles that they're prepared to die for. And that's it, that you
How do you
will.
make how do you know that should be a real man? Because I would try to break it down to in a way that's logical. And I'd say a real man is probably not a child. And there's something we call a man child. So a real man, I guess, is somebody who's developed. And then what makes you developed? Maybe and then Habib lists a whole bunch of stuff like um planning for what does he say? He's got a whole very interesting list. He goes, you wake up early, you pray, you train, silence, don't be a crybaby, don't make excuses, don't follow your feelings, even your emotions, which is a very common thing in the West nowadays. Like, oh, I feel like I'm a woman. A man says I feel like a woman, therefore I must be a woman. Stuff like that, right? Um, yeah, so those are the kind of things that he's talking about. What discipline means is all sorts of processes, being consistent. Um, yeah, and I don't think these are things that I would say describe a real man, because it doesn't describe what a baby would do. So you have to have some self-control that makes you beyond a child, and that would, you know, I think count as a real man. What do you think? Like, you'd have to have well, why do you, so your definition of a real man was somebody who's got principles. I suppose a child wouldn't do that. A child doesn't have principles, it just has urges. I want stuff right now, especially a baby. I just want to have milk, therefore I will have milk. And I suppose and then what was your other thing? A real man is somebody who has principles so strong that they would die for. I suppose that would make a real man as well, to have really strong principles, and a child doesn't have. So yeah, so that yeah, it makes
But
sense.
what I'm describing, I think, is actually a fact. Even if you're a man who doesn't want to die for anything in particular, I mean, the point is that you have to say you're prepared to die for them, right? You have, and then people think, oh, he really has principles, but at the back of their mind, they might think, but he might desert, he might, break all his promises, but at least he knows that he has to say he has principles to defend. And what might those principles be? They would be moral principles, and moral principles come from religious principles. So he would
Hmm.
have to say, well, I'm, whatever religion he is. But assuming he's an atheist, he would still be expected to, be honest and reasonable, right? Because even atheists want, not to associate with liars believing in nonsense. So you can narrow it down to at least, okay, just two. But then, the whole point of being a man, if you're going to be honest, you're going to say, well, if somebody's attacking your country, you're not going to send the women out to defend
Hmm.
your village or whatever. You're going to do it yourself. And if you ask the women to do it, they would tell you exactly what they thought of you. So
Hmm.
two bad guys. If your community is under attack, you would be expected to sacrifice, risk, or at least risk your life in defending it. And if you desert or refuse to do it, and have no proper excuse like, well, I'm too old, I'm only a child, you will be treated with contempt and ostracized for your cowardice. And if you think you're going to desert, you're not going to find people who trust you if once they realize that you're a deserter. If you
Yeah, as long as you believe in the cause of your country. And nowadays, a lot of men would be questioning that, because most Western countries are just there to, they're basically modern day pirates, aren't they? Just go around pillaging and stealing people's oil and just, wealth, gold, I think France, especially, going to all these African countries and stealing their gold, and
Mhm.
the other Western countries going to the Middle East, stealing their oil and stuff like that. So, as long as you believe in their principles, then yeah, that's bravery, I guess, and that makes a real man. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I mean, Western imperialism has been going on for centuries, but up to a point, it worked for them because they thought, we're the most powerful, people in the world, we Europeans, we Americans. But now they don't seem to have that same self-image anymore. They seem to be a little confused about their identity and their gender and all kinds of things, and they don't support their government.
Yes, because in the past, see, there's American imperialism is different to British imperialism, because at least in British imperialism, they had paintings of them going to black people, African people, and saying, "Here's the Bible, and we're giving you civilization," right?
Hmm.
But they don't really. Americans don't really have that. It's almost like a joke. We're going to give you what was it? We're going to give you freedom. No, no, they don't
We're
say
going
that.
to give you liberal democracy.
We're going to
And,
give you
and
democracy.
Westerners themselves are getting a little tired and very suspicious of liberal democracy now.
Yeah, you don't really have democracy here. I mean, certainly not in America, or but brought up by APAC, and you seem to have a similar sort of problems in other Western countries. Um, yeah, so it's really transparent. I think in British colonialism, people actually believed what they were doing because they when they were saying that we're going to give you the Bible or Christianity, at least the British followed Christianity then, didn't they? They believed in marriage, stuff like that. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes. So I mean, we see the power of marriage because if you think of Christianity, it's basically nonsense. But as long as the white man continued to respect the institution of marriage, they kind of talk sense. They remained powerful, and even if they made mistakes, that they seemed able to correct them. But now they're just you know a hopeless basket case. That they don't even make sense to themselves anymore, because
Yeah. Christianity has its value as long as you don't question it too much. There are values in it. Like, I mean, you don't want to think of it like, oh, how does the Trinity work? Because that's just not going to work, right? But it still has its value in things like marriage. What other principles? Do as you like to be done to others, but I don't think the British colonialists really did that. But there were sort of vague ideas of values, and so that was, I suppose, really different between the big difference between British colonialism and this offshoot, which is American colonialism. I think American colonialism is just, would you say it's kind of an atheistic, even it's kind of controlled by Zionists, right? So it's kind of like just a weird materialistic grabbing as much as you can for no
yes,
good
be
reason.
behaving like gangsters, really. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Zionism because I'm saying the British, even way back in Victorian times, they knew the geopolitical significance of controlling the Holy Land, i.e., Israel, because even if you didn't value Israel for its religious significance, you would think if you want to control international shipping, you'd want somewhere near the Suez Canal. You'd want it to face the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and control the Arabs and the oil. And if you can
Hmm.
just say you
The
conquered it,
oil
and
is a relatively new thing, but I think when was the Suez Canal made? Do you
the
know?
eight. The end of the 18th. Let me just check for you. I don't want to just guess. Um,
Yeah, it was pre-oil though, but it was good for shipping anyway, like getting stuff from India, which has had a lot of value.
Yeah, and also Israel is the meeting point between Europe and Asia and Africa. So,
Yeah,
it's a crossroads, right? It
yeah,
opened in 1869.
okay,
So,
yeah.
and
Oil was
obviously
kind
if you
of
want to control.
1900. Yeah,
Yeah, so the British had always had their eye on it, and with the Sykes-Picot agreement, all their plans have been about controlling the Arabs and the oil. But then if you say it's Israel, particularly after World War II, you can say we're the good guys, we're protecting the Jews from being exterminated by people who hate them, and then you have this sort of good guy excuse for being there, right? Not we're
hmm.
just there. We've got nukes and nobody else has, as many nukes or as powerful nukes as we, because we don't want to just be, this gangster warlord person who's just there because we have bigger guns and we're better
Yeah.
at
It's
killing.
good to have a story. It's good to have a story, just like the Zionists. And there's always people stupid enough to believe the story as well, like the Zionists in Israel. They actually think, even though they don't believe in God, but God promised them the land. That kind of weird contradiction, but yeah.
Well, I suppose the thing is, these Jews could just say, well, in chapter 17, verse 104 of the Quran, it does say that Jews, even in the end times, they're to go and live there. They're not already living there. So, oh, what are you on about? Kind of thing. I mean, that I think we did two streams discussing that
Yeah,
verse. And I
yeah.
know Muslims hate that verse because they don't like the implications of it. And I'm just saying, look, whenever a Jew says, "Oh, look, your Quran says we have a right to live there," you can say, "Yes, but only under Sharia."
Yeah, they would be brought back without going into the whole topic again, but they'll be brought back doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good thing, or yeah, it could be both good and bad at the same time. Kind of
Yeah,
like, yeah, yeah, because I
uh,
think good will eventually come out of it. It's just it's a point in time. It's a prophecy about a time or a phase in humanity,
in
and
the
so
end times, the end
yeah, the
times.
end times, basically. Yes, yes. But the end times for me are not like the end. That's the marker of the last, I think, 1,000 years. I can't remember what it was according to the Ahmadiyya understanding or something. Like, but there'll be good things to come in. Then finally, it will fall apart again, and then that'll be in the end of humanity. But it's the last phase. Let's say, was it 1,000 or 7,000? I forget. Anyway, uh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, but I mean, it's logical. It's like, if the universe was created, then it will have an end. What has a beginning logically and necessarily has an
yeah,
end, right?
yeah.
So, and all
I'm
of
just
it.
saying the end times for most people is like for like most people's understanding, like in Christianity or even Judaism, they're like it's the last few days. It's just like God will force everybody to believe in God and then send them packing to heaven or hell, like just some crazy weird thing to do at the end of the universe. But that's not my understanding. The end times are like a good phase of humanity, but it'll be, there'll be World War III and there'll be lots of bad things happening before that final phase where humanity finally learned its lesson.
Yeah, and, I mean, I know. Okay, I know a Muslim who said, "I don't want to be around, in the end times." I know the Jews and Christians are actually wishing for it, but there'll be war everywhere, and it won't. It doesn't sound like a pleasant time to be around in. And I sort of get that, but why do the Jews and Christians want the world to end? I think it's a sign of their neuroticism because the Jews obviously find it very hard to follow the Torah, and they know they're not obeying it, and even the religious ones are thinking, well, half of us are heretics, so it's not a good um, show for God if he exists. And of course, the Christians find it very difficult to believe in even in their own story. And that's why they are so neurotic and want the world to end because they can't, on one hand, admit that they've been wrong, and on the other hand, continue to pretend that they believe in the nonsense that they claim to believe in. Well, that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. But while Muslims are sort of, well, we just have to obey God's laws and we'll get to heaven, right? I mean, that's your
Mm.
belief anyway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
Mm.
that's nice and easy to believe, and obviously it's the Jews and the Christians who are neurotic, and that's why they want the world to end. Why would you want the world to end unless you're having a terrible time, right? It's sort of
Yeah,
like I want to kill myself, but I can't bring myself, but I'd just be happy if the world ended, so I know I won't be missing out on anything because I guess at the back of the
yeah,
mind.
I think that makes sense in some ways. Like, I'm thinking about like if you don't, I think what's his name, Jordan Peterson was saying something like, if you are chaotic in your life, what you do is you don't fix your own life, you go try to fix the rest of the world, or you like chaos in the world basically. So maybe I can kind of understand that if you're a Christian and deep down your religion doesn't make any sense, you like these chaotic ideas, and you probably want, if there's a story that says, yeah, you're going to go to heaven, even if you're messing things up, you have to wait for these end times. I suppose that also makes sense. And I agree, Muslims don't look out for anything like that. They just live I would describe as a disciplined life. And if you have a disciplined life, which is what we were talking about earlier on, things just get better and better. What do you think? Like, what do you think about discipline? Because I think you talk about men not being developed. They're not, getting to the level. They're not marriageable. You know, wouldn't you say being disciplined and being marriageable are similar things?
Well, I think it's very important to know who we are, and so much neurosis is caused by people not knowing who they are. And if you don't know who they are, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, right? That
Yes,
is
who you
really
are, what
the
direction
problem.
you're going, yeah, that kind of thing. What's your purpose?
Yes, so that's why, if you don't know if you're male or female, then you're just going to go crazy. And
Yeah,
and basically the West has done that, haven't they? They are
yeah,
going crazy. They don't know if they're male or female, Christian or not Christian, idolaters, or just everything is a problem. Just even thinking about the thing probably, drives them crazy. And that's why they want the world to end. And, maybe that's why they're moving towards World War III, so they can blow the whole world up, so nobody inherits after them, so they can say, we are the beginning and the end. And, we've just blown up the world in a nuclear holocaust. So nobody can say they came after us.
yeah. You do have to have some sort of theory to explain Christian Zionism, which is a really odd belief. Like, you do really want the whole world to blow up and all that stuff, and then you go to heaven. This doesn't seem to be, yeah, yeah,
Oh, Christian Zionism is a different thing altogether, because you would have thought if you were a Jew, you don't want to be and took your religion seriously, you would not want to be under Christian Zionism, and it is currently run under the principles of Christian Zionism, because it's Christians who fund the protection of Israel and the Iron Dome, and all the money that America sends to Israel so it can
yeah.
protect itself from rockets and whatnot. So they it is
Yeah,
Christians
whichever
money.
Zionism it is, you want the world to be destroyed, and you think your group's going to go to heaven, and the other group's going to be dead. Like the Christian Zionists think the Jews are going to go to hell, right?
Well, no. What they're trying to do, which a lot of people don't seem to be aware of, is that they're going to get all the Jews to go and live in Israel, and then they're going to convert the Jews to Christianity.
Oh yes, I forgot about that. If they listen, yes, then they'll go to heaven. Yeah,
No. I mean, the point is, if you're a Jew and you really took your religion seriously, you would not want to be converted to Christianity, would you? You would
that's right.
not,
Yeah,
because
you're right.
then your afterlife is destroyed. Because then
Yeah,
you die guilty of idolatry, and
yeah,
idolaters don't go to heaven, and they go to hell. But if you didn't really take it seriously, what the Christian Zionists do to Jews is say, well, you fancy relocating to Israel? Well, we'll pay for all your relocation costs. We
yeah.
will. And they
Yeah.
do. And have you heard of Rabbi Tovia Singer?
No, I don't think so.
Well, anyway, he was the chief rabbi of Indonesia, and he was saying he could have relocated to Israel, where he now lives, on the dime of the Christian Zionists, but he had the sense not to, because his whole shtick now, he's got a YouTube channel. He basically warns Jews to have nothing to do with Christian Zionism or any of the clever ways that these Christians have of converting Jews to Christianity without actually calling themselves Christians. So, I mean, they have this clever way of saying to Jews, Jesus was a Jew, and your Messiah will come. You agree with that, don't you? And the Jew would have to
Hmm.
say yes. And it's like, well, you just have to believe that when he comes, the Messiah will be Jesus. Oh, and by the way, the Muslims believe that too. So and the Muslims, that's what they believe. And it's not going against your religion to believe that the Messiah,
Hmm.
which your religion already accepts, is going to be
Hmm.
Jesus. So
Hmm.
a lot of these Jews accept that, because of okay, they will have accepted a lot of hospitality from these missionizing Christians, because
Hmm.
obviously a Jew is more valuable to them in making the Messiah come than an ordinary Gentile. Though they do also try to convert Muslims to Christianity too.
Right. Yeah. 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 I don't think it's working that well, but yeah. Cool.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
if you've heard of a few ex-Muslims, apostate prophet, he became an Orthodox Jew, and he didn't like it, and now he's becoming a Catholic.
Oh, really? Is that what he is? I didn't know. I thought he's just an atheist. Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Well, he's probably being paid, by these people to, I guess, move Muslims over to Christianity, and say, well, you don't have to, be
I've never heard
restricted.
him preach Christianity, is what I'm saying. I've just heard him just insult Islam. That's it.
Yes, but recently he did convert to Orthodox Christianity, and then he said something, and
Oh, okay. Not keeping up with his craziness.
no.
Okay.
but
Cool.
but yeah, I mean, the whole thing is to cause confusion amongst people who are supposed to take their religion seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what they're trying to do, and I hope people will stay sensible, because I don't think it's like the Ten Commandments is basically that it's already told you no idolatry and no blasphemy.
Hmm.
And according to Christians, Jesus was executed for blasphemy. So why are you worshiping him, Jesus? I know this is not what Muslims are supposed to believe about Jesus,
Yeah.
but according to the Christian narrative, Jesus was crucified for blasphemy, because he said his papa was God.
Yeah. So, how should we wrap up? Because I like to keep it to an hour, although I like talking to you, but about consistency. So, um,
I'll just let you say whatever you wanted to say that maybe I didn't give you a chance to say, and I'll let you wrap up that way.
sure. Thank you. Yeah. So, to wrap up, I'd like to summarize what we discussed so people can take away something useful. We talked about the afterlife, which was my last live stream with our Jewish friend David. And we're basically saying the afterlife is a really good mechanism for making good choices in this life. It's not a separate airy fairy thing, and there's scientific reasons to believe in the afterlife. We just discussed one of the scientific or reasonable reasons. And then we talked about what is a man, what is discipline, which is what I'm going to be talking about in my next live stream on Sunday with David the Jew. And I think we've been talking about that kind of thing for a long time. You talk about it in terms of marriageability and the different aspects of being marriageable. And I think a real man who can provide, and to be able to provide, you need to be disciplined. And I'm going to go into that in a lot more depth as to how Islam explains disciplines leads to spirituality and oneness with God. So, yeah, looking forward to that conversation on Sunday.
Okay. Well,
All right.
everybody go and watch
Yeah,
that stream.
yeah. Just search my name, Khalid Safir, and you find my channel. All right. Thanks as
Oh,
always, Claire. It's good we have different kinds of conversations here than I do in my other streams, so it's always good.
yes. Yes. Thank you
All
for
right.
coming, and speak to
You're welcome.
you again soon.
Yeah. Catch you next week, hopefully. Bye.
Okay. Bye.